and welcome to another installment of TED Excellence, the show in which I find out that being bad is good, I guess. And I come to you live from my Corona bunker on the moon with Dogcat Fox, a Pepperjack, and all of you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Thursday, Tempestuous Thursday, or I should say maybe Temperature Thursday, because I hate the heat. But c'est la vie, as they say, or as the old folks say, because, you know, you never can tell. It goes to show you never can tell. Anyway, I'm thinking back to old song lyrics. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing well today. What are we doing today? Well, aside from me bumbling over my introduction, we're going to be looking at a restorative justice sales pitch, of which we have witnessed many over the course of this series. But I'm always holding out hope that one of them will finally leave me thinking, maybe that's a good idea, or at least having clarity over an idea. Leaving punishment behind, embracing new ideas of justice. So I don't know if this is going to be a we need to abolish prisons pitch or what. I only know from the title. And I can assume that we're going to be talking about restorative justice. What is restorative justice, you might ask, for those of you who may not be familiar with the term? Well, in very simplified notions, it is the idea of, and I know I'm going to be sounding very dismissive and condescending when I put it this way, but I can't think of a more simple metaphor: kiss and make up. That is kind of the core of restorative justice. Not have incarceration, not have, your life being overturned and fined into non-existence because of crimes you've committed, but moreover, having to confront the victim of your crime or victims of your crime and come to some sort of accord so the community can move on. Again, it is an oversimplification, but it's shorthand. I'm sure our speaker will give us more information, possibly. But before we get there, who has decided to join me on this extended journey into the wonderful world of restorative justice? Why, that would be Jaeger Pony. Hello. Tall Person. Hello. Lexi Mads. You're here before I begin. Oh my God. Okay. Corey Suzuki. Hello. Mike Savage. Blarg. Some Manual Nation. Hello. Mike R. Hello. Funtime Bats. Hello. Keeverdam. Hello. Zeke Weiss. Hello. Brittany Holland. Hello. Ryan R. Hello. Mr. E. Hello. And then chat jumped because, of course, it did. Zalbla, hello. Jaeger Pony, if I didn't already say hello, hello. Hi, am Steve. Hello. Debatefly, hello. Swirl Blue, hello. Let's see. The Check Your Logic, hello. Dumbbeard, hello. Brad Young, hello. Tall Person, thank you so much. Let me pull this one up while I have it in front of me. Happy World UFO Day. Do you have those at your moon base? Does Dogcat Fox have a tiny one he uses to get around, or is that classified? Well, there are no UFOs on the moon because they are identified. So you're kind of out of luck on that one. Does Dogcat Fox have his own space vehicle? I don't know. I suppose someone would have to represent for me what Dogcat Fox flies around in, because half of what has come up with for this lore is things people have asked me or just made things up. So I don't know. I'd have to write that movie, Dogcat Fox's Spaceship. It's going to be a children's movie, I guess. Sounds like a cartoon for kids from the 80s. Dogcat Fox's Spaceship. Let's see who else is here. Barbara Pincus, hello. Maximus Groves, hello. Hayden Teetsy. Hayden Teetsy? Tizzy? Shamitsi? I don't know. Megan Ring, hello. Sabian 187, hello. Juggernaut, hello. Zero the Hero 909, hello. MC Photography, hello. And Texas Attorney General Secret Agent, hello. All right, so everyone, we're going to get on with the video. The bingo card for today's episode is bingo card C. C as in conviction. You can find the links to the bingo cards in the description below. Bingo card C. Get your bingo card ready. I will start off with a few seconds for sound test. This clocks in at just under 15 minutes, as in 14 minutes, 33 seconds. So your average TEDx talk. Let me know if you can hear this, and we will then begin.
A few years ago,
it was a very good year. You guys hear that okay? A few years ago. Lexi Mad says okay, or all good, I should say. Perfect sound, says Dumbbeard. Perfect. All right, I love being perfect. I did boost things a little bit. All right, a few years ago,
I was telling a friend of mine, another lawyer, about an innovative project using art and restorative justice to respond to intimate partner violence.
Okay, so pieces of information ahead of time. Our speaker is a lawyer, at least by implication. Art and restorative justice to respond to intimate partner violence. So, otherwise known as domestic violence. Okay.
Instead of going to the police or using the courts, people could use this alternative approach.
Whoa. Intimate partner violence, don't bother calling the police. We're not even 30 seconds into this, and I am... No. Mr. Tickle Trunk, thank you so much for the happy, smiley Dogcat Fox. Oh, Dogcat Fox. Wowie, wow. Dogcat Fox is very happy that you have portrayed him as being happy. At least that's what I assume. I still can't understand what he says. He just says that thing. And it's sort of like Groot. I am Groot means anything. Wowie, wow could mean a whole bunch of things. Thank you, Mr. Tickle Trunk. Okay, so instead of calling the cops when your intimate partner punches you in the face, we're going to employ art projects? Please tell me that's not what I am to understand.
And when I said this, my friend grimaced. And then he said, well, this...
Oh, this is a two-camera setup. Wow, okay. Yes, your friend grimaced and said, well, this...
This being the criminal legal system.
Oh, the criminal legal system. Remember, everybody, the criminal legal system is the new reformed term for the criminal justice system, because as we know, there is no justice in this system. The legal system is itself criminal. We've heard this before. We will hear it a lot more. I've mentioned this in the past. Thank you. This is Kyle. Hello, chat people and scribbles. Thank you, Kyle. And hello. All right, the criminal legal system.
This is how it's always been done. I nearly fell over. And to be fair to my friend, he immediately realized that he was making a historically and geographically global statement without any real basis.
What? Wait. Okay, just to make it gender neutral. Intimate partner commits violence on other intimate partner, and calling the authorities. Well, I mean, I guess you're correct. It's always been this way. Well, I suppose depending on what culture you're talking about, what part of the world, it might not have been always this way, because in some places, let's say a husband slapping around his wife wasn't seen as a criminal act, or at least not serious enough to call the authorities. And even today, that could be the case. I don't know. But that's not really the point of contention I have here. It's that whole part of let's avoid calling the police after an incident of intimate partner violence or domestic violence. I don't know why she's not saying. Okay. I'm going to back up a couple of seconds. I have cut her off a couple of times. She just keeps blowing my mind.
I nearly fell over. And to be fair to my friend, he immediately realized that he was making a historically and geographically global statement without any real basis. And he walked it back real quick. But the moment stayed with me. And it stayed with me because that moment, that immediate knee-jerk response, is such a common response in so many of the conversations I have about justice.
Okay, wait. And I think I just expressed my confusion over your, I don't know, proof that you were right or something? Okay, so you say instead of calling the cops when it comes to domestic violence, employ restorative justice art projects. I can't wait to hear more details on that one. And then your friend says, wait, no, calling the cops, that's just the way it's always been done. Now, again, your friend may be incorrect in making such a grand hyperbolic statement. That's the way it's always been done. But his reaction of shock that you would respond to an act of violence with anything other than getting law enforcement involved and that art projects is going to be a decent alternative. I don't think it was his hyperbole that was the problem here at all, if that's what you're saying. I think the problem is your suggestion. But okay, please give me more details on what you're talking about.
We cannot imagine an alternative response to harm because it feels like the way we have been doing things, the way we have been responding to harm, is the only way.
You brought up a very, very specific category of crime. Okay. Domestic violence. But don't call the cops. Okay.
We are so...
Apologies, my phone is beeping at me for some reason. Let me take a look at this. Sorry, guys, live television. Okay, it's phone spam. I'm going to turn this on to silent so that doesn't happen again. So, sorry about that. Okay, let's try that again. Backing up a couple of seconds. I'm so professional, guys.
Have been responding to harm is the only way. We are so mired in the current system that our immediate instinct is to push back against any alternative. We didn't get here on our own. We were trained up this way.
I don't know what you're talking about. You had some very specific proposals, and now you've gone into weird, vague generalizations. What alternative are you proposing to calling the cops after an incident of domestic violence? That question is going to hang over this talk until you get to the answer, because that was your opening gambit, and I'm still waiting.
In this country, from the time you are young, popular media teaches you that law and justice look a certain way. There are the obvious examples, the incredible amount of television and film about policing and criminal trials.
Yes, there is a rule of law in this country, and there are some established laws that, most people would say are probably things you don't want to violate, like theft and murder and assault and rape. Yes, there is a sense of a rule of law. You're correct. And that can be reflected in the media on occasion. Yes. So?
But there are less obvious examples as well.
Okay.
TV shows from He-Man to Star Trek seek to impart lessons in all aspects of law.
What? He-Man and Star Trek. Yes, from He-Man to Star Trek, yes, these shows have asked moral questions and tackled, more so Star Trek than He-Man. He-Man's that is a bizarre thing to bring up if you're talking about actual examples of law, when you're looking at Prince Adam fighting Skeletor in Eternia with the sorceress over at Castle Grayskull and Beastman and Tila getting it on at Snake Mountain. I mean, that doesn't quite sound like something I'd look to towards for legal advice. But okay, setting that aside, yes, television shows can from time to time tackle issues of morals and values and gray areas of humanity and so on. So what does that have to do with art projects and domestic violence?
From rule of law and governance to what constitutes an acceptable contract. And if you go to law school, like I did,
I'm beginning to question that claim. Thank you, John Miller. So no real examples. Glad she didn't pick Law and Order SVU. Well, I don't know where she's going right now, especially if her He-Man and Star Trek. All right. Mr. Tickle Trunk, thanks so much. We used to solve domestic violence with a bevy of approaches, including tar, feathering, ignoring the issue, or violent community family intervention. Yeah, I mean, I guess tar and feathers could be an art project of a kind. Okay, I'm going to go over the bingo card real quick in case somehow I've missed something in my bewilderment. Plays victim. She hasn't talked about herself yet. Okay, leaves out vital context. I am getting ready to circle that one if she doesn't get back to that domestic violence art project thing pretty quick. But I'm also tempted to say, what does He-Man have to do with teaching the rule of law, say for like basic morals and things like that? Weightless example, He-Man might be it. We'll see. Anecdote that probably never happened. The only anecdote she's given is her exchange with her lawyer friend, and there wasn't anything about that sounded beyond belief. So I'm not going to circle that one now yet. Benevolent condescension. We might get there. Self-vilification or wretchedness? No. Feminism? No. Childhood or family anecdote? No. Privilege? No. Equity? Not specifically yet. No. Microaggressions, unconscious bias? No. Patriarchy? No. Free space? Well, we haven't had one yet. Wage gap? No. Mind reading assumes motives. Depending on how she interpreted what her friend said, but she got very vague. No, I'm not going to circle that one yet. Attempt to coin new buzzword or buzz phrase. Not that I've noticed. Word salad. We might have already been there, but I'm going to give it a little longer. Diversity and inclusion. No. Marginalization. No. Contradicts own point or argument. I don't know what her argument is yet. Systemic institutional. Well, she said the criminal legal system. I'll give it that one. Okay, systemic institutional, circling that one, and thus then free space. A list. I mean, from He-Man to Star Trek. I'll circle that. It's a short list, but it's a list. White supremacy, no. Make something about race, sex, etc. for no reason. Not yet. Collectivize his own demographic. Well, unless she goes off on how all lawyers do X, Y, Z, then no, not yet. Okay. So far, free space, systemic institutional, and a list. Let's proceed.
Then you are even more entrenched in the system.
Wait, sorry. I need some backup for some context as to what she was talking about here.
Law. From rule of law and governance to what constitutes an acceptable contract.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to law school, like I did, then you are even more entrenched in the system.
Well, you are part of the system, presumably. You are there to work within the rule of law, depending on which side of the bench you are, I should say. And yeah, I mean, fight for your client, whether it be the individual being charged with something or if you're a prosecutor. Yeah, you're part of the system. Okay. Yeah.
And I was.
Was?
I'm a law professor at the University of South Carolina.
Oh. Got it.
With a background in international human rights. And for a long time,
yes,
when I thought about problems of violence, particularly gender-based violence.
Gender-based violence. What sort of violence amongst human beings does not involve gender? You see, I love when they say gender-based violence. They're talking about violence against women. They're not talking about, you know, anything else, but just violence against. I don't know why she doesn't say violence against women. right? I mean, if a man beats up another man to prove that he's a better man, is that gender-based violence? Are we going back to motive now? Or is it just when women get hurt? Because that's usually how it goes.
I immediately thought about how to get the state to step in.
What?
In the international human rights system that I was trained in,
Uh-huh.
criminalization was a key recommendation to respond to certain problems of violence.
Yes. If someone hurts someone else unjustifiably, that is generally considered to be a crime. Now, obviously, if you're talking international, it would come down to the specific country and or the specific culture and or et cetera, et cetera. There's a bunch of conditions there. But more often than not, if you unjustifiably attack someone with violence, and I mean like physical violence, it usually falls within some category of crime. And then you call the cops, and then the person who committed the crime is adjudicated in some way, shape, or form. Yes. Okay. But you want to do art projects again?
But it was hard to look away from the harms that were being committed by the very criminal legal system we were looking to for protection.
Such as?
In the United States, criminal policies disproportionately impact young Black men from lower income neighborhoods.
Thank you, Mr. Tickle Trunk. Yes, we've since improved from torches and pitchforks. Have we, though? I mean, torches and pitchforks pretty much come down to tweets and Facebook posts these days, don't they? I know I'm being a little funny there. Okay, so the criminal justice system is focusing on young Black men. I thought you were talking about gender violence or gender-based violence. Okay, so I'm my brain is trying to jump ahead to what she's talking about, but I don't know what she's talking about.
Communities of color, LGBTQIA communities, and certain immigrant groups, among others, report negative experiences with police and courts.
Certain immigrant groups. I have to ask, would any of those immigrant groups involve people who are in the country illegally to begin with? Or are they here legally? Immigrant groups. Okay. So are they being approached by law enforcement because they are Black, because they are gay? Because I'm fairly certain that there are laws that say that's a no-no. Now, that does not mean that people do not break the law. That does not mean that police officers do not go on their own judgment, justified or otherwise, and their decisions have to come up for review. Okay. But that comes down to a case-by-case basis, because I'd be not delighted. I'd be very interested to know if you're going to point to some law or policy that says it is okay to prosecute someone because of their skin color or because of their sexual orientation. Okay, that I would be very curious to see in the modern day. Now, if you're going to say, well, there's a law that says it's illegal to be in the country illegally, well, that one I'm not going to argue with you on. But okay, law professor, tell me where it is law to prosecute someone for their skin color or their sexual orientation today. And if that is the case, if you can point to that, whether it's a state ordinance or a city thing or even a national thing, I'll be right next to you and saying, get rid of that. Otherwise, it's going to come down to a case-by-case basis, and you're going to have to do a big deep dive on figuring out the intentions of the people involved in the criminal justice process. And that's a much harder row to hoe.
Even when they're the ones reporting the harm. People who have been convicted of a crime have difficulty finding housing or employment.
Yeah, that's one of the consequences of being convicted of a crime. You have violated the sort of social contract of trust. And there are consequences for that even after you've served your sentence. Now, if she's going to go into detail on what some of those things are and whether they are fair in the long term or not, I'm happy to have that conversation. But don't act surprised by that or that that is some kind of injustice. It's not necessarily so.
Even after serving their time and
Yes.
repaying their debt to society, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the victims, you might ask?
Well, yes. When it comes to restorative justice, I often ask, what about the victims? Tell me about the victims. Tell me how an art project is going to heal the bruises and cuts to someone who's experienced violence from their intimate partner. I'm dying to know. Unless the art project is learning how to apply a Band-Aid.
The criminal legal system is not built to help victims. In 2016,
Whoa. The criminal legal system is not built to help victims. Okay, well, you tell me. The family of a murdered individual, the victim of rape. Does the victim of a the victim's family of someone who's been murdered, do you think they feel better or worse when the person who killed their loved one is put away? The victim of rape, do you think they are feeling better or worse when their attacker is taken off of the street? Which do you think it is? I mean, there's no taking back the harm that has been done. The question is, will the person who has committed it be held responsible? And if they are of a particular threat to people, will they be removed from society to prevent them from victimizing others? True, putting away someone who has murdered your loved one doesn't bring your loved one back. It doesn't cure what ails someone in that situation, but that's the best we can look for on the temporal plane. But, it doesn't help victims. And that you're just going to move on from that? Oh, okay. Well, great. I guess it just doesn't. Get rid of it.
the Alliance for Safety and Justice published the first ever national survey on victims' views on safety and justice. And according to this survey,
this one survey, are you going to tell us the circumstances and the metrics of that survey? I doubt it.
2 out of 3 crime victims did not receive any support to help them recover from the impacts of being victimized.
What would you expect to have happen? What are you suggesting? Okay, this is the problem that you've put forward, even though you've already offered a solution to domestic violence, but haven't given us any details. All right, the victims of crime do not feel supported by the criminal legal system. All right, so what should happen? Or what is your proposed solution to that?
Of those who did receive support, the majority received it from friends, family, or hospitals.
What kind of support are you looking for? What kind of support should police officers and court officers and judges, what should they be doing that they are not?
Not the criminal legal system.
You know, every time I hear someone say the criminal legal system, as though they're being clever, it really gets on my nerves. You know, trying to change the words around to make it into something pejorative. Yeah. Okay, so again, what do you propose?
The survey also reported that a significant majority of victims actually prefer alternatives to punishment and incarceration.
Such as?
Yet, even knowing all this, people still argue in favor of a punitive criminal legal response.
It depends on the circumstances of the crime. If you are going to say, get rid of punitive punishment across the board, that argument's dead in the water to me. If you say certain crimes at a certain level and downward should have alternatives available, you might get me. If you say something like third-degree misdemeanors and downward should have things available other than incarceration and so on. Okay, you've got my ears open on that one. But that's not what you're saying, is it?
It is hard to imagine another way.
No, it is not hard to imagine another way, but it all depends on the crime in question. If you're not going to piece this out on the severity of the crime, then you have a losing argument from the get-go.
Remember that friend I was telling you about?
Yes.
The one who was struggling with the idea of restorative justice?
Was that what he was struggling with, or just that he made a technically inaccurate statement about how criminalized domestic violence has been across the world and or in history?
He, like many others, couldn't imagine another way. He couldn't imagine using restorative justice, a non-punitive approach, to respond to problems of intimate partner violence.
Well, okay. As Han Solo once said, I can imagine quite a bit. However, you are here making the sales pitch. You opened up the door with your offer of an alternative, except you have given us no details on this alternative, how it works, when it is implemented, by whom, and how it's supposed to solve the problem. The onus is on you to tell me how that works. So go ahead.
Let me back up for a minute.
I wish you would.
What is restorative justice?
Oh, that's a good thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, there's no single model.
Well, I guess that releases you from having to give us a good answer.
Commonly, in response to a harm, restorative justice will bring together the people who have been harmed, the people who have committed the harm, and community stakeholders. Right.
We're going to have one big circle. There's another word you can put along with that, but either way. Okay, so you have the rapist, the rape victim, and people from the neighborhood where the rape took place. Okay, I've got it in my mind. I have the scenario in my head. Proceed.
Conversations will include in-depth discussion of the harm that's been committed and its impacts.
Okay, that person raped me. He's destroyed my sense of trust in other people. I may have picked up a disease of some kind. I'm scared to go outside, and I'm trembling in fear of being in the same room with this person. Okay, proceed.
In the criminal system,
the criminal system. Yes.
A person's testimony can be limited by rules of evidence or a lawyer's strategy about how to tell the story of what happened.
You mean preserving the rights of the accused for a fair trial? Is there any process in restorative justice to determine guilt before confronting someone as though they are already guilty?
Restorative justice, on the other hand, delves fully into what happened.
No, it delves fully into the accusation. Because here's the thing. What procedures does restorative justice contain to assure, within reasonable doubt, that the person being accused of a crime committed the crime before they are put on public display as though they are already guilty? Riddle me that one.
The intended outcome is accountability.
Is it, though? Accountability based on what? Evidence? Supposition? What?
Accountability requires the responsible party to acknowledge the harm that they've committed and its impacts.
How have you proven through the restorative justice process, absent a criminal trial, that the person you have accused of the crime is the one who committed it. How does restorative justice determine guilt?
To make appropriate reparation to the people they've harmed.
How do you know that they've committed the harm?
And to take steps to ensure that they won't do it again.
How do you know they did it in the first place?
Restorative justice asks us to shift away from a focus on punishment.
No. Look, you're punishment. We haven't even gotten to punishment yet. You're saying the entire process of determining responsibility needs to be thrown out. You're talking about witness testimony. No. A trial in and of itself is not punishment. A trial is meant to determine guilt, to weigh the evidence of the accusation against the accused. We haven't even gotten to the punishment phase yet, but you're throwing that out completely along with the entire process of determination of guilt. So someone accuses someone else of a crime, you take it at face value, you bring them before a local tribunal to be confronted about the crime they may or may not have committed, and then they have to be held accountable for the crime that they may or may not have committed, and then make restitution for the crime they may or may not have committed, because restorative justice. You're a law professor? Thank you, Mr. Tickletrunk. I'm corrected. We're back to torches and pitchforks. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And instead, focus on arriving at real accountability.
Okay. What is real accountability? If it's not incarceration, what is real account? Give me an example. Give me an active example. Give me even hell. I'll take the broadest hypothetical right now. Okay, give me a hypothetical. Theft, right? Okay, theft. How would you handle theft? Walk me through it. Something, anything. Because you haven't told me how art projects are going to help with domestic violence, and you haven't told us how restorative justice is going to handle a rape case.
I used to be quite skeptical of restorative justice.
And now you've thrown all possible critical thinking out the window. Got it.
But I've since come around to it. Well, I've more than come around to it. I really believe in it.
Uh-huh.
In addition to being a law professor, I'm the executive director and founder of the South Carolina Restorative Justice Initiative.
Oh, so you've got an agenda. And you use your seat as a law professor to push your agenda, do you? Okay.
Our mission is to promote education and dialogue about restorative and transformative justice, and to support the development of restorative practices in South Carolina.
Such as?
Restorative justice is now a significant part of my work.
This is my shocked face.
Interest in restorative justice has been growing, and that's exciting, right?
Yeah, no, I'll tell you what, I am right along with you there. My interest in restorative justice has been growing presentation by presentation, year by year since I started doing YouTube. Yeah, I am right there with you. My interest keeps growing.
People will learn about restorative justice, they'll incorporate it into their work, and I'll be happy. Job done. Not quite. I've noticed that even as acceptance in restorative justice has been growing, so much of that new acceptance continues to anchor itself in the idea of the retributive criminal legal system as the primary default response.
Well, given the fact that in the universe of this presentation, you have so far given us zero details on how the restorative justice process would handle your average court case, in contrast to the criminal justice system, I can't imagine why people still kind of default back to something that has been tested year over year and built upon and revised and reformed again and again, as compared to some nebulous notion of sitting down and talking it out. So you need to sell me on this, and you are doing a very poor job of it. And yet you founded an organization to promote it. Could you just, I don't read your brochure or something out loud? Because so far I haven't heard anything that makes me think you have any good ideas about how to handle a rape case or a murder case. Especially when you just skip over the whole determination of guilt part and get straight to the punishment, as though the trial itself is part of the punishment phase.
For example,
Uh-huh.
when people talk about restorative justice,
Yes.
so many of them speak only of healing and
What?
forgiveness.
What?
I can recall one particular documentary film about restorative justice,
Uh-huh.
which highlights the case of a woman who not only forgives the young man who killed her son, she embraces him.
So, if someone kills someone else, but the family member most directly tied to the victim chooses of their own volition to forgive this person and hug them even, the rest of society has no interest in seeing this person punished. Because you're implying to me that if the victim says it's okay in the case of murder, then this person should experience no other consequences to their actions? They don't pose a danger to anybody else outside of the one victim that we're talking about here?
She welcomes him into her life and calls him her son.
That's her choice, and more power to her. But her forgiveness does not then become society's forgiveness.
He calls her his second mom.
Well, good for
And
him.
it's beautiful.
Oh,
it's
well.
very moving.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
But it's sold as the story of restorative justice. Not by any of the practitioners I've met, who are very frank and down to earth about their work.
Why isn't it the story about restorative justice? You just told us that the restorative justice model is you take the person who committed the harm, you set them in front of the person who experienced the harm, and then you have stakeholders around them, and you reach accountability. So how is that any less a story of restorative justice than any other story of restorative justice? And wouldn't the most serious crime that could be committed between a person and another person be the epitome example of how restorative justice is supposed to work? Because if restorative justice is a one-size-fits-all solution to crime and harm in our society, well, you can't get much higher than murder in most cases, so shouldn't that be the golden example to you?
But among mainstream audiences, so much of the storytelling around restorative justice focuses on these larger-than-life individuals.
There's nothing larger than life about someone who kills someone else unjustifiably, because they're scum. The larger-than-life individual may be the mother who took it upon themselves to forgive the person, but that's on them. But whether you're talking about simple theft or mass murder, restorative justice offers itself as a one-size-fits-all solution. So why is that somehow out of bounds? As an example, what? Thank you, this is Kyle. This lady seems like the dumb people that think even life, every life is precious. You know, unless you wrong think, then you're literally the incarnation of evil. I don't know how to assess where we're at with this. She's gone everywhere but giving us details. She said everything but actually explaining what she's talking about. And now it sounds like she's trying to dodge the epitome example of what restorative justice would have to do in the most serious case. So
in this narrative, it is easy to perceive restorative justice as something that's only available to a small group of people who are special enough to participate in it.
well, restore the lady forgiving the serial killer. Sorry, not the. I don't know if it's a serial killer. The lady forgiving the person who killed her son. That's restorative justice? That's all it is now? I thought it was an alternative to incarceration and prosecution. She took that upon herself. Is the killer thus restored? What are you talking about?
Restorative justice becomes this magical exception, and the criminal legal system is treated as the justice inevitability.
What? No, you're the one promoting restorative justice as a magical solution. I am very close to hitting a particular button. Very close.
It doesn't stop there.
Uh-huh.
I've been having conversations with people all around the country who are interested in learning more about how to support and implement restorative practices in their communities.
Give me an example. Please give me one hypothetical breakdown of the process of restorative justice for a semi-serious crime. Domestic violence, let's say. You know, the one you brought up at the beginning of this. How does restorative justice work in a situation of domestic violence? What art project is going to assuage the damage done and the damage that could also be done in the future through art? Tell me.
And a good number, not all, but a good number of them.
A good number of, not all. So whatever you're going to say next means absolutely nothing. Okay.
Only want to hear about restorative justice in the context of juvenile justice.
Well, and I've talked about this on previous videos, juvenile justice, or that level of things, is the one place where restorative justice practices might be most effective and make the most sense. If you have minors and they've done some crime and there's an opportunity to avoid sending them off to incarceration of some kind and have a diversionary program that will teach them, hopefully, not to do it again, you know, a scared straight kind of thing or whatever else, that is where you're going to have the most success, probably, of trying to save some kid from going down a very bad path. You know, kiss and make up, shake hands and go away as friends. That kind of stuff happening in elementary school makes some sense because kids are still learning. And legally speaking, they're not yet wholly responsible for their actions. So if you're going to do restorative justice as a regular component, then that is the area that makes the most sense the most consistently. Now, is it the only place it could apply? No, I don't think so. But you're not talking about keeping it relegated to one area, are you? You're talking about it being applied everywhere.
Or face-to-face dialogue with people who are incarcerated.
Uh-huh.
Or as a diversion program that's attached to courts.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we have examples of other types of restorative practices right here in the United States.
Like?
And look, I'll support.
Okay, sorry. I'm circling leaves out vital context. Too many times she has dropped something and not followed it up with any kind of supporting evidence or even an example, hypothetical or otherwise. Leaves out vital context, circling that one. Weightless example. The lady forgiving the guy is not an example of restorative justice as you have described it. At all. Anecdote that probably never happened. Benevolent condescension. Yeah, I'm being talked down to. Over and over again. Self-vilification, no. Feminism, no. Childhood family anecdote, no. Privilege, no. Equity, no. Microaggressions and conscious bias, no. Patriarchy. Wage gap, no. Mind reading assumes motives. I still keep coming back to how she interpreted her friend's reaction to her domestic violence art project, but not specifically. Attempt to coin new buzzword, buzz phrase. I want to give it to her for the whole criminal legal system thing, but I wouldn't want to credit her with coming up with that because she didn't. So I'm not going to do that. Word salad. I will by the end of this. I don't want to wait a minute. Diversity and inclusion, no. Marginalization, no, not specifically. Contradicts own point or argument. Okay, now I'd be doubling up there. White supremacy, it's implied a little bit with her talking about the statistics and things, but not yet. Make something about race, sex, etc. for no reason. Yeah, actually, she brought up young black men, she brought up LGBTQ, and never followed up with why that has anything to do with restorative justice. So circle on that one. Collectivize his own demographic. She hasn't talked about lawyers writ large or anything else yet. So here's what I have circled. Leaves out vital context, weightless example, benevolent condescension, free space, systemic institutional, a list, and make something about race, sex, etc. for no reason. Okay.
Any move to a more restorative approach. But the fact is, it is easy to reach for those three options because they do not require you to reevaluate the existing system.
Okay, so alternatives in juvenile justice, alternatives in court cases. What was the other one? Sorry, I did cut her off there. I didn't mean, well, I guess I meant to, but I didn't,
Even though we have examples of other types of restorative practices right here in the United States. And look, I'll support any move to a more restorative approach. But the fact is, it is easy to reach for those three options.
What were the three options? Juvenile justice and what?
By any of the practitioners I've met who are very frank and down to earth about their work. But among mainstream audiences, so much of the storytelling around restorative justice focuses on these larger than life individuals. In this narrative, it is easy to perceive restorative justice as something that's only available to a small group of people who are special enough to participate in it.
I know I'm going backwards here a little bit, but if the victims of crime do not want to participate in the restorative justice process, can the restorative justice process at all take place? If the rape victim does not wish to be in the same room with their rapist, do you still proceed? If the family of the murder victim does not want to participate in anything less than putting away the killer, does restorative justice work? Or if you have nothing but a restorative justice option, is the victim required to participate? You tell me.
Restorative justice becomes this magical exception.
When it should be the rule, okay, so is everyone required to participate?
And the criminal legal system is treated as the justice inevitability. It doesn't stop there. I've been having conversations with people all around the country who are interested in learning more about how to support and implement restorative practices in their communities. And a good number, not all, but a good number of them only want to hear about restorative justice in the context of juvenile justice.
Okay. Juvenile justice, that's one of the three, okay.
Or face-to-face dialogue with people who are incarcerated.
Okay, so like with the lady that forgave her son's killer. Okay, that's two.
Or as a diversion program that's attached to courts.
Right, so in that case, I think there's a program in Oregon, I forget what it was called, where you could go take mandated like drug rehabilitation program instead of being locked up. And if you succeeded going through that program and reported back that you changed your ways and everything else, then you could avoid incarceration, right? But it was still, I mean, the incentive hanging over your head to complete the drug rehabilitation program is not going to jail. because otherwise there's not really any reason to do that if it's not a diversionary program. So you're saying juvenile justice, face-to-face conversations of people already convicted, and diversionary programs tied to courts, those are all not good?
Even though we have examples of other types of restorative practices right here in the United States.
Like?
And look, I'll support any move to a more restorative approach. But the fact is, it is easy to reach for those three options because they do not require you to reevaluate the existing system.
So what are you offering instead? Because so far it's been art projects and kumbaya circles.
If you can only imagine restorative justice working for people who are under the age of 18 or who are already incarcerated or as an outgrowth of a criminal process, then you are limiting what restorative justice can be.
Then you need to tell me how it would work in the alternative. The onus is on you. You are trying to sell me on obliterating the current system and replacing it with your idea. And you have yet to tell me how an art project is going to deal with domestic violence.
And you continue to elevate the punitive criminal legal system as the default.
It is the default. From the time we began as civilization, a criminal justice process of one kind or another has been the common thread, nation to nation, society to society, of one kind or another, for thousands of years. So it is the default. You are the one that's trying to sell me on the alternative, and you're doing a lousy job of it.
But we are not bound to the carceral state.
Oh, the carceral state. I haven't heard that in a couple of TEDx's. The carceral state. That's a new word. Not a new word that she came up with. The carceral state. We're not bound to it. Okay. Then what is your proposal?
We are not limited to the existing criminal legal enterprise.
Okay.
The criminal legal system does not have to be the default.
Well, then what should be the default? Tell me about the domestic violence art project.
Restorative justice can be for everyone. For angry people, for impatient people, old people, young people, and people who have committed multiple types of harms.
Angry people, impatient people. So, if I'm irritated at waiting too long in line, do I have to take part in a restorative justice program? What? Come on.
What? What is that? What the fuck is that?
I was holding out a long time there, but no. You don't get to go from murder and domestic violence down to impatience without giving us some details. Give me a break. Come on.
We can look to historical and comparative examples for support.
Okay.
For example,
Yes.
in Uganda,
Oh. Are we going to go over the truth and reconciliation process? Shall I pull out the studies that showed the dissatisfaction with the truth and reconciliation process? I'm guessing. I haven't watched this, but you start talking about, yeah, okay.
many traditional justice institutions use practices and principles that we see today reflected in the modern American restorative justice movement. Specific practices vary across clan or tribal group, but generally, when a harm has been committed, Some form of reparation is offered to the person who has been harmed.
Where's the determination of guilt? And I obviously jumped the gun with the truth and reconciliation process. That was, my brain was a little scrambled there, you'll forgive me. That was more primarily instituted in South Africa post-apartheid. In other places as well, but most famously South Africa, sorry, after apartheid. So I jumped the gun there, but okay. Where's the process for determination of guilt? Because you threw that out the window earlier.
And the community is responsible for educating the responsible party and helping them change their behavior.
Educating? So would putting someone in stocks in the town square be okay? Tar and feathering again? Do any of the tribal practices, and I honestly do not know what she's referring to, except for Uganda, but that's kind of a broad spectrum of things. Do any of those restorative practices involve violence upon the offender? What do they do in the case of rape? What do they do in the case of murder? I mean, you're bringing them up, so you tell me how the tribal practices of Uganda would apply to the most serious crimes.
Today, we see these practices used in regular, everyday justice.
Practices such as what? You cannot talk in generalities if you're going to be offering an alternative to an intricate system of justice as we have in this country. You need to give an example. How does one compare to the other? This is how a case of theft is handled in America right now. This is how a case of theft would be handled under restorative justice. That would give me something to sink my teeth into. Why aren't you doing that?
In a process called reconciliation.
Ah, I was close. I was close. I said truth and reconciliation. Uh-huh.
And I have met multiple practitioners who use reconciliation to address cases of domestic violence.
Okay, so after 11 minutes, we come back around to your first offering. All right. And you called it domestic violence this time. Not intimate partner violence, not gender violence, domestic violence. Okay. Thank you, Inhuman Form. I or A or doing a Fonzie kind of thing. I'm not sure. Hello, Inhuman Form. I'm looking at a sales pitch for restorative justice. And so far, my wallet is still in my pocket, so to speak. All right, so how can reconciliation, instead of calling the police in an incident of domestic violence, work better?
This practice is not limited to juveniles. It doesn't relate to incarceration, and it can occur completely outside the courts. This practice is not limited to a special group of angerless individuals with hearts bigger than the universe.
What is it? How does it work in relation to an incident of domestic violence? You mentioned an art project at the beginning of this. I want to know how finger painting is going to take the black eye off.
In fact, I can think of one example.
Please.
A case in which a woman and her partner
Yes.
entered into a process to resolve the violence that she was suffering at his hands.
Okay, so he's beating her up. All right. Finally, I've been waiting for the example. Thank you, John Miller. I wonder what Hammurabi would think of restorative justice. You know, I almost mentioned that earlier when I was talking about, you know, thousands of years of precedent and multiple societies coming up with similar structures of justice in their countries, nations, and such. But I figured I would mispronounce the name, and so I stopped myself. And I think the proof was just in the pudding. So thank you, John Miller. All right. So lady's getting beaten up by her partner. and she decides to enter into a process. Did she decide to enter into a process rather than calling police because she didn't trust the police, or she thought this would be a better option, or because she's suffering from battered wife syndrome?
Not only did she openly and freely express her anger, but at the end of the process, as a part of his accountability agreement, her partner agreed that he would stay away from her and that they would end their relationship.
So he beats the shit out of her and he agrees to break up with her. Okay, so when his next partner gets the shit beaten out of her because nothing was done to either restrain or correct him in any meaningful way in the previous incident, who should be held to account for that harm done in a restorative justice process? Thank you, in human form. Pi for a pi code of the Hammurabi. Is that like blood for the blood god? But no, seriously, lady, giving this guy a pass because he just broke up with his girlfriend who he was beating up, that to you is a fair outcome? I don't know. I guess my concerns just run longer off into the distance of predictability than that.
The process still offered both parties what they wanted and needed.
Did it? Really? Okay.
An opportunity to speak their truths, to ensure that appropriate reparations were made. They break up. So wait, let me get this in my mind here. Girlfriend is beaten up by boyfriend. Rather than leaving him herself, she enters into a process of restorative justice where he is held to account by breaking up with her. Was there anyone else in the room when this process happened? Who were the community stakeholders that were supposed to be present? What is to happen to this guy if he happens to beat up his next girlfriend? Will he be more or less incentivized to take such action in the future because of this process? What is the recidivism rate of a restorative justice process implemented en masse? Do you have those answers for anybody who might be curious? I know I'm asking rhetorical questions, but you're the law professor with the organization promoting this. So, and to have a plan for the future that worked for the both of them and the community.
How? How is the guy going to be held to account by, quote unquote, the community should he do this again? What happens then? He just has to break up with the person whose nose he broke?
I don't romanticize these processes.
Horse! Excuse my having to get up for a moment. You have got to be kidding me. You have got to be kidding me. You have just spent the last, what is it now, 13 minutes? Almost 13 minutes. Telling us how the evil empire of the quote-unquote criminal legal system needs to no longer be the default, that we need to go back to a time of simplicity, where tribal laws in Uganda are the standard, and how wonderful it was for the lady to forgive the killer of her son. And And you're not romanticizing anything. You just took domestic violence and you didn't even give the guy a slap on the wrist. You gave him a pass. You gave him a promise you won't do it again, Bob. And you're not romanticizing this. Well, you sure seem to be watering down the seriousness of domestic violence.
They can perpetuate harm.
What? Say, wait a sec. Sorry, let's back up a little bit. I just need to hear that one more time.
Have a plan for the future that worked for the both of them and the community.
Yeah, and also, again, where was the community involvement in that example? You talked about the boyfriend and the girlfriend. Who from, quote unquote, the community was there? How is the boyfriend to be held to account by the community in the future should he reoffend? You didn't tell us that. Why didn't you tell us that?
I don't romanticize these processes. They can perpetuate harm.
But I thought that they were not like the criminal legal system. How can they perpetuate harm? Tell us about the flaw in this perfection. Or are you going to gloss over that concession too?
In the case of gender-based violence.
Gender-based violence, you mean violence?
They can, and at times have, reinforced harmful patriarchal norms.
Patriarchy! We're on the board with patriarchy! Oh my gosh. And are patriarchal norms the worst thing that can happen? Because only men offend? Remember, guys, gender-based violence just means violence against women. That's all that means. I don't know why she's not saying violence against women. It'd be far more accurate than this gender-based thing. But okay, so restorative justice practices can reinforce patriarchal norms? Oh, you're going to have a real hard time selling this to feminists. But
this process offers an approach to resolving disputes in a way that can work better for the parties involved, and that also seeks to change future behavior.
How? Did you see how long she paused on the admission that her grand plan reinforces patriarchal norms? How does the example of the boyfriend breaking up with his victim, how does that prevent recidivism? Please do tell, because if it does not, you're not selling me on this. Thank you, Mike R. It's the very rational Duluth model. I mean, wow, way to completely hamstring yourself and everything that you've dedicated your life and work to at this point in the 11th hour of your own presentation. Wow.
Uganda's just one example. Other examples exist elsewhere in sub-Saharan Africa, in Asia, and among various indigenous groups in the Americas.
Right. So indigenous legal practices are the default we should be going towards, even though they reinforce patriarchal norms and can perpetuate harm and don't guarantee that the person won't reoffend. It's setting aside thousands of years of legal jurisprudence, evolving laws that have been tested over and over again with the evolution of society, but you're still pushing this. Got it.
To name a few.
Yeah.
And what these examples reveal is that the American legal system's response to harm is not an inevitable result of the human condition.
What? The laws that we operate under are a confession of our understanding of the weaknesses of the human condition. To make theft illegal, to make murder illegal, to implement the civil rights acts. These are confessions of human frailty, weakness, and corruption that can seep into any person if left unchecked. And these laws have been created and tested and revised and implemented and retested again and again and again and again. And they are based on the same kind of thinking that you are elevating to the heights of modernity from the tribes of Uganda. They are the evolution of the very things you are promoting as the solution. And yet you cannot even deny, and I'll give you credit for this, you cannot even deny that what you are proposing has major flaws in its thinking. And yet you persist.
Other approaches have existed and continue to exist. As we seek to incorporate restorative principles, we do not need to anchor them in our system's punitive justice experiment.
Yeah, I guess we don't need to, especially if you're going to leave a domestic abuser to just walk away from his crimes with a promise that he'll be a good boy from now on.
There can be another way.
You know what? I will agree. There can be another way. I'm sure there is possibly another way. I have listened to you and at least a dozen others give me the same pitch. There is a system as an alternative that is better than the one we have. And every single time you fail to convince. But I will give her credit. Again, she at least, took her long enough, admitted to the glaring problems with her own proposal. Very few other speakers do that. But yet she still just hand waves them away as though they don't imply something far greater than what she's saying. It's just...
Restorative justice might not even be the final answer.
Then why are you saying that it should replace everything? Why are you saying that a hybridization of the two is not the answer? If you're allowing that you could be wrong, how can you absolutely say with certitude that you're right? What? Oh, man. Juggernaut, this idea infuriates me. The abuser doesn't learn from it. Sorry, but someone like that usually only learns from jail or a solid family beatdown. Shake my head. It was her argument to make. She opened the whole thing with an example, but she mentioned art project. She never got back to the art project. Even in the example that she gave, as abstract as it was, she never gave the art project. Wow.
Justice might not even be the final answer. There might be an even better way. But we will never get there if we do not give ourselves the freedom to more openly embrace new approaches to justice. Thank you.
How is a combination of restorative diversionary options with the established criminal justice system not a new option? How is that not something that can grow as it is tested over time? Why are you throwing out the entire possibility that there could be a compromise? No. Everything about the criminal justice system has to go out the window. From determination of guilt And certainly the punishment phase. All that has to go. We can't let witnesses go on the stand. The criminal justice system does nothing to help victims. It's all bad. So we're going to have circles of the victim and the offender and community stakeholders to sit there because an accusation was made, and then force the accused to give up reparations for the crime they may have committed, and then just let them go on their merry way to obviously never do anything bad again in that same vein. What do you do about the drug addict, or the alcoholic, right? Somebody who has a compulsion that they have very little, if any, control over, but yet they must feed. What reparations does the drug addict make to the person they stole from, either passively or violently? And how does a circle prevent that person from reoffending if they're still addicted, if they still have a compulsion that is either completely or mostly not under their control? I could come up with hypothetical questions for this process all day. And at no point would it make any sense to me. Because it just doesn't. And even her own example makes no sense. You're going to let a domestic abuser walk away and his only punishment was just he had to break up with her? What was that, his punishment? He broke up with her? That was her greatest example. That was the only example she ever brought up throughout this entire thing. She never gave us another example of this in practice. The mother forgiving the killer of her son, he was already incarcerated. He'd already been convicted. And she did that for her. She made that choice for herself because she wanted to move on, because she wanted to not live in hatred and despair for the rest of her life. And more power to her. That shouldn't be required of her under a restorative justice system, which, again, I can only assume the victim is required to participate. Otherwise, the whole thing breaks down. What happens if the victim does not want to just sit down and hash things out with the offender? Granted that we've even proven the offender's guilt. What happens then? I'd love to know. Thank you, John Miller. Anarchy, anarchy, anarchy. Well, I mean, if you're screaming for anarchy, can you also scream for Jughead and Betty and Veronica? Forget Reggie. Anyway, thank you, John Miller. Okay, let's go to the bingo card to find out where we are at, where we are going. Did we accomplish anything? Probably not. But we're going to do it anyway. All right, so I'm going to go over it one more time, everyone. After that, I will take suggestions or proposals for squares yet to be circled, and then we'll wrap things up. Plays victim. She never brought herself up in anything. Her only conversation with her colleague, but that wasn't, at no point did I feel like she was putting herself in the victim category. So, anecdote that probably never happened. The only anecdotes we got of any weight, I should say, is her conversation with her colleague. And again, there wasn't anything there that made me think this is a self-serving commentary or anything like that. She seemed to completely decide how to interpret his exasperation at her proposal of an art project for a domestic violence call. Anyway, and the only other anecdote was the restorative justice incident with the domestic violence couple, which anecdote that probably never happened. I can believe that happened. I can believe that someone facing down, being called, having the cops called on him, agreed to sit down and talk and be let off the hook completely without consequence. I can believe that that happened. Self-vilification or wretchedness? Nope. Feminism. Oh, wait, I didn't update the card since her last. There we go. Patriarchy was on the board. It's not reflexive of me to circle feminism just when patriarchy is brought up. Let me think for a second. Okay, she talked about gender-based violence, which is just violence against women. I've never understood why they have a separate term for something that is very plain on its face what you're talking about. But was there feminism involved here? Nothing directly. And if there's an argument for it, it's going to have to come from you guys because I can't see it. Childhood or family anecdote. She never talked about herself, aside from the fact that she's a lawyer or was a lawyer and a law professor and runs this organization. She never brought up her own past. She never brought up anything dealing with her family, so I can't circle that one. Privilege. Yeah, not. She brought up disparities in justice based on the young black male and LGBTQ plus, but never went any further with that. And I kind of already circled to make something about race, sex, etc. for no reason. So I'm hesitant to circle privilege. It's a very specific concept. Equity. I mean, it's implied that the criminal legal system is unfair, therefore restorative justice would do away with that. Okay, I'll circle equity by implication, by aggregate implication, if that makes any sense. Let's do that. Microaggressions, unconscious bias. No, never came up. Wage gap. God, trying to think. Did she bring up the poor at some point? I'm sorry. I'm everything kind of vague at the moment. I don't think she brought up a wage gap. I'm happy to be corrected, but I don't think she did. Mind reading assumes motives. I'm circling this one for her partner and the reaction her partner had and how she decided to interpret it. I think his exasperation wasn't so much over the concept of restorative justice, but that she was suggesting an art project was somehow going to redress a domestic violence call. Because she didn't give us any other information about his response other than that didn't make any sense to me. Attempt to coin new buzzword, buzz phrase. Again, I wish I could give her credit for criminal legal system or carceral state, but these have all been used in previous TEDx's, and yeah, she's not the author of that concept. Word salad, boy oh boy. If not in a whole of this entire presentation, then certainly in very dramatic bits did we have a word salad. Diversity and inclusion, nope, those never came up. Marginalized, marginalization. I mean, again, you can make the argument that her bringing up the demographics of young black males, LGBTQ, etc., having disproportionate outcomes, maybe. But again, I already kind of covered that with make something about race, sex, etc. for no reason, and I'm hesitant to double up on one thing unless it's. I'll need a pitch on that one. Contradicts own point or argument. Yeah, at the very end where she said, it can still perpetuate harm, keep going patriarchal norms, and doesn't necessarily guarantee that someone won't reoffend. And truth be told, no system of justice, short of just murdering everybody you find to be guilty of a crime, can ensure that someone won't reoffend. But she was offering it as a total solution alternative to the current system. And yeah. And also, she held all that back until the very end of her presentation. So yeah, I'm circling that one. White supremacy. Again, aside from just bringing up that one claim of demographic disparity, hard for me to circle that one. Again, I'll take arguments. And collectivize his own demographic. In no meaningful way did she ever talk about lawyers writ large or anything about herself or whatever demographic she otherwise falls into. So I can't really circle that one. So there you go, everyone. That is the card as I have it right now. We are on the edge of a bingo or two, depending on what I am offered by you guys. If you have pitches to be made, let me fix the window here a little bit so the whole card is in there. There we go. If you have pitches to be made, put them in the chat now. Be sure to tag me with my @scribelight in there so I can see that it's for me. And then I will go on. Let's see. Let's say John Miller said what now? Thank you for catching that, Skypipe. Did you intentionally mean to put Anarchy in there? Anarchy? Because if you did, I caught it. I caught it because I'm clever like that. Some Amniel Nation says forget Reggie. Yeah, Reggie. Hell, who cares about Reggie? I always like Jughead. Jughead liked hamburgers, and I love hamburgers, so I was more of a Jughead guy. Let's see. Lexi Mads, justice for victims. I couldn't face the guy who sexually assaulted me. Fuck sitting in a room together and working it out. I avoided that guy like the plague. You know, that is, of all the examples that I've always wanted to hear something said from restorative justice advocates, that's the most dramatic one. And I know it might seem like a cheap shot, but it's not. If they are offering this as the end-all be-all solution to all crime, then I really want to know what their response is to the rape victim. And again, granted that there's some process involved in first determining guilt of the accused in that case, because a false accusation can be just as bad as a true accusation, depending on the circumstances. But either way, I want to know, what would they do if the victim of a sexual assault said, I don't want to participate? If the criminal justice system was gone and we only operated on restorative justice practices, and there are three components to a restorative justice process, the victim, the offender, and community stakeholders, and one of those three does not want to participate, what do you do? What happens then? As far as I can recall, I've never had an answer provided by any of the presenters so far on that question. Very curious. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Let's see, I'm looking for Anthem Ward. Scribe just replaced circle with stoning, and then it all makes sense, especially when you think about the countries this is coming from. That was on her. She wants to hold up, and I don't know. I have no idea what the tribal practices are in Uganda or whatever she was mentioning. I don't know. If you're talking about restorative justice in certain Middle Eastern countries, yeah, stoning is fairly common. Cutting off hands is fairly common. I don't think that'd be called restorative justice, though. I don't think that she would, even in a system that had things like that, I think she'd probably say that's probably bad. And I'll at least extend her the benefit of the doubt on that one. But not knowing what else goes on in the Ugandan tribal practices, couldn't say. Kieverdam, scribe like diversity, equity, and inclusion into one square. Yeah, that's something that I talked about doing. I should probably do that. The question, of course, then becomes what to replace the equity square with. So, So is there something new I should put in there, or something from the olden days I should bring back? I should probably put a poll up on that one, see what you guys think sometime in the near future. Let's see. Mr. E says, many of us here believe her friend actually walked back what he said. Didn't fucking happen, Scribeline. Oh, you mean the colleague? Was that it? Yeah, that whole anecdote of hers, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but it was confusing as to what her point was there. Was he walking back his comment because saying this is how it's always been done is technically untrue, because domestic violence being adjudicated in a court of law hasn't always been the case throughout human history? Was that what he was doing? Or was he taking it back because he saw the value in what she was proposing? And I don't believe that for a second. So I don't know. That didn't make any sense. Lexi Mad says, put in problematic. I'm hesitant to put in just like slang words. It usually has to be like a concept, at least a concept, right? Equity, so on. An adjective is something I'm usually hesitant to put in there, just because it can be said during the course of normal business and it doesn't necessarily become a trope in a TEDx. It has to be something that is common to these presentations or is seen more than once, that we don't have a square for, or something to come back with. So Again, I'm probably going to put a poll up on Twitter about it in the near future, see what people think. Check your logic. Speaker should not be an occupation, whatever that means. And your parenthetical there is why I took it out in the first place. That is such a abstract judgment call, depending on the presentation. Like, she's a law professor. Well, she shouldn't have that job. Well, maybe that seems relatively clear-cut in this case, but in so many others, it becomes such a point of, Yeah, that's why I took that one out, because it was way too subjective. Way too subjective. Some emulation scribe light. Doesn't the use of the phrase gendered violence instead of domestic violence automatically imply feminism on the part of our speaker? That was the one part I was kind of teetering on, because that is a term that is used a lot rather than saying violence against women or trying to make it more specifically women oriented. Domestic violence is domestic violence, whether it's a female to female partner, male to female partner, female to male partner, male to male, whatever. It gendered violence. I mean, if a woman punches another woman, is it gendered violence? If a man punches another man, is it gendered violence? If a man punches a woman, if a woman punches a man, what makes it gendered? I never understood that term. I never understood why you say gendered violence, but then you're only talking about just violence from men onto women. Because women never abuse men? Yeah, I never understood that. But does that qualify as enough of a feministic term / notion to circle the square? Okay. She talked about patriarchy. She talked about gendered violence. All right. I will leave it to you guys because I am on the fence. Does that qualify? Is feminism a running theme throughout the presentation, at least enough in the examples provided between gendered violence and contrasting with patriarchy as a major concern of what's going on in restorative justice? If you think that the square should be circled, put a 1 in the chat now. If you do not think it meets the criteria, put a 2. So 1 for yes, 2 for no. And on balance, I will take your recommendation. I see a 1. I see a 2. I see a 1. I see a 1. 1, 1. And you only get to vote once. I don't want any double ups. No double ups. And I trust you guys to give your 1 vote. 1, 1, 1. All right. Okay. Lexi Matt says 1 just about. Okay. Well, the jury has spoken in a system that is obviously outdated and terrible and should never be put into practice again. And by your leave...
Bingo.
What? Of course!
And there we have it, folks. I think I'm going to call that here. I don't really see any further mountains to climb on some of these squares because you're not going to convince me of collective bias zone demographic, privilege. That's just too far afield to come out of this with necessarily. So I don't think there are any other bingos to be had. But all that being said, boy, oh boy, this was something else. But it does have something else that I have to add because of the fact that I hit a particular button before someone reminds me that I didn't do it. And that is the WTF Circle of Shame. There you go. The circle of my own Restorative Justice Act, being that this was a WTF presentation. Man, she hit that one point. I'm like, no. Now, I'm not trying to romanticize it. No. Thank you, Don Vitae Rex. New Square, regressive ideas and practices disguised as progressive ones. Oh, that's a lot of text. If I was going to put it in a square, I'd have to find a shorter way of putting it. But I will. I'll think about it. Again, I'm going to put up a poll in the near future. I'm going to go back to some of the old bingo cards and see if there's anything in there that might still be relevant. And of course, I'll invite people to put up their own suggestions. I might have to go through a couple of polls or put up a suggestion list first and then do a poll. We'll see. We'll see. But thank you, Non Vitae Rex. Keep that one in mind when I put out the questionnaire. regardless, everyone, one more restorative justice pitch, and it failed to land, as far as I'm concerned. Still so many questions that were not answered, still so many basic and I think reasonable concerns that just weren't addressed. But as things proceed, when I see them, I will cover them, because you never know. The next person might offer something that is either coherent or actually convinces me. One of the two, maybe both. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me. You guys are really the greatest audience in the world. Everyone who've donated, thank you so much for your generosity. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things, even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very little to do. Now, my usual spiel with a caveat. If you'd like to hear more from me or Satsu 2 Cents, you can find us both tonight, conceivably on Satsu's channel, not my channel. So for those of you that do not know, Satsu took the night off from the show last night on Wednesday night because he is in a particular area of pain bodily. He went to the hospital today and is having x-rays done to make sure there's nothing, well, odd going on. I don't know what the latest is on that yet. Might show up on Twitter after the show here. So if we have a show tonight, it'll be on Satsu's channel. For the Lords of the Night, where conceivably we will go over the news of the day, news stories you submit, we've been up to on the internet, and then your questions and comments. If Satsu's not up to it, I'm likely going to take the night off from the show rather than throw off the schedule even further. So keep an eye on Twitter. You can find my handle in the description below if you want to follow me there. I'd appreciate it if you do. And if you would, take a moment to like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and tell people that you liked it. I appreciate it. So everyone, again, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you are all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.